Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending Starr's first ever virtual conference for 2020. I am Shay Soma. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer at Starr Commonwealth, and we are so excited to kick off the last session of the overall conference with a question and answer panel. I'd love to introduce you to some of my colleagues and friends. We will be taking all of your questions over the next hour or so, and then we'll wrap up with just a bit of housekeeping at the end of the session. So first, I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Derek Allen. He is our Executive Vice President and the Chief Operating Officer at Starr. Kathy Hart is our Director of Professional Training and Coaching. And do you know who she is? Wave, Kathy. Erin Reed is our Senior Trainer. Us. Hopefully we can get to all of these great questions that are coming in. I will try to read the questions and then we will just sort of take turns going around and talking about what people are asking. So our first question is, I've learned so much over the past 3 days. I'm so glad to hear that. But I know I can't do everything all at once. So what's the one thing I can do right away to support my students? What do you think? Who wants to take that?
I'm happy to start off. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can.
How's the volume? You can hear me? Okay. Yeah, okay. You know, I think one of the most important things we can do for young people right now is just to connect with them. So if you're a teacher who's coming into a classroom in the coming year and you know, you're worried about knowing your students, or you're worried about what it will look like, whatever creative way you can reach out, whether it's a phone call or, you know, a Zoom meeting or a Google Hangout, or if it's available to get together safely outdoors. I think it's just creating those relationships and making those the very first thing. What comes to mind when I think about when I get overwhelmed with all that there is to do and all of the needs that are really real right now, I just remember at an ACE conference hearing, "We are the medicine." And so remembering to never underestimate the power for strong relationship. So I would say start there.
Yeah, Erin, I was there with you, and that was such a powerful statement, right? Sorry.
I think I could take a stab at this one. Before I do though, if I were at an in-person event in front of all of you with my team here on stage or in front of an auditorium together, I'd be acknowledging, first of all, how phenomenal this conference has been the last 3 days. For those of you who've been attending, you haven't seen me because this is the first time that they've let me on. But these guys have been leading you through some amazing workshops, and it's been an absolutely phenomenal experience to see the team doing this important work. And definitely a shout out to the control room, Mr. Reed on North Mulberry there, for everything that he's done to make this happen too. I just think it's outstanding. And since putting together this all-star team that we have, I haven't been out training as much or speaking as much, but when I was, and I would introduce myself, I would talk about my role as a father and how that's a really, really important job, and how no matter what hat I wear, being a parent will be the most important role I ever hold. And raising up a new generation of new human beings who will take care of the world and all of us is the most important and noble thing I think that any human could ever do. And unfortunately, as we know, there are so many kids, too many kids out there who don't have parents who can be there for them in that way. Either they are absent for some reason, or they don't have the skills they need to be there for their kids in that way, or in some cases, maybe they choose not to be there for their kids in that way. So I'd have to echo Erin's sentiment that piece on connection has to be paramount no matter what. Because the relationship comes first and nothing else is going to happen or work. So if we are operating via distance, or there's something that's getting in the way of the normal way we would connect with kids, we have to be leveraging whatever communication channels or technology we have at our disposal to be able to make sure that kids know we're thinking about them, that there's a caring adult out there who loves them, who's interested in their success, who sees their greatness, who wants to help them write their success story, right? They have to know that one person, right, who's irrationally crazy about him or her is out there thinking about them. And so that's first. The thing that I thought Erin might say that I was actually going to say until I just stole her answer was that another thing that you could be doing is taking care of yourself. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, you're going to be for the kids that you're serving. And so that's why, again, I bring up, my relationship with my son. For me, spending time with Sam is probably the greatest self-care strategy that I have. And it refills my bucket. And that's something that I have to keep doing for myself, right? It's having that quality father-son time to keep myself centered and during this really, really stressful time. And so I can't help others unless I'm first helping myself. So that's another point. Thank you, ladies, for letting me do something for the conference. Now I'm done.
Well, of course. So we're so happy to have you. I agree with you, Erin, on connection, but I'm glad you brought that self-care piece into it. I think you were starting to say something, Kathy.
I was just going to say, I was at that conference with Erin, and that was such a powerful statement. We are the medicine, that connection piece and that belonging. And I mentioned in a couple of my presentations, so many teachers have told us that they're really concerned about how to get to know kids this fall. That, when COVID hit, that they had known so many of their kids for at least maybe, 3/4 of the year. And now they're going to be faced with a lot of new students and not knowing them. So that connection and belonging piece is so important. And I like Shane, I emphasize this a lot. I think you mentioned it in your keynote, and I've mentioned it, is that looking at what's already going well for a kiddo, don't focus on just what's wrong. Like maybe they've had some illness and sickness in their family, or they've had loss and potentially traumatic things happening, but what's going well for them? Like what's already going right? What are the kiddos' strengths? And really nurturing that resilience in those kiddos, or restoring that resilience in them, I think is a huge piece too. Somebody really smart told me that, Katie. Dr. Soma.
Katie, did you have anything to add?
It would just be piggybacking off of everybody else, but I think the relationship piece is huge. Connecting with kids is what we're all about, and the more you can connect with kids, the better you can support them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just got a question that came in from Allison. Allison asked, what is the one thing we can do to support our staff when they return? I focus so much on supporting children through all of this that I worry I will forget about the adults that went through the same thing.
I'll take this one at the beginning. One of the things I would say is ask them how they're doing. Check in. When this all happened, it didn't just impact kids, it impacted all of us. And there were times in this where we weren't okay, and really needing other adults to give us the grace to say, hey, today's not a good day for me. I'm really having a hard time. So I think when you're going into the school year, be understanding to the fact that this unknown isn't just scary to our young people, but it's also scary to some of our professionals. And giving them that space before meetings where you don't just jump into the meeting, jump into the thing we have to do, but you take that minute and you say, I want to check in with all of you. How are you doing?
Yeah, amen, Katie. I was just on the phone with some high school educators, and they're trying to plan their social emotional learning curriculum for whatever fall will be, and that was what we came to and landed on. Any social emotional support that we're offering students, we should be ritualizing in our meetings with our adults. So whether we're starting with a mindfulness moment to help us get regulated, or some kind of feelings check-in, that, or community proactive circles. Let's just get in a circle like we're talking about doing with our kids, whether it's virtually or in person, and do it for ourselves, because we have to be regulated. First have to be aware that we matter and what's happening to us is impacting us. And then we have to have something put into place every day that helps regulate us. So if you have a self-care practice that does regulate you, double down on it. And if you are in leadership within your district, really encourage your staff and your colleagues to be able to set boundaries around that. Right? Like it's not okay to never think about yourself. It's not okay to not take care of yourself, where it becomes this culture and this norm where we're supporting each other in really taking care of ourselves. And if that comes first, I have full faith that educators will be so resilient in this time. It will all fall into place. Just like we said, relationships come first for kids. Well, then if it's coming first within our educational communities, everything else, I mean, will become easier in this really, really challenging time.
The more we talk about what's most important, the more I want to change my 10 steps. the more I think Derek and I should revise our book and say, hey, what comes first? Is it supporting staff? Is it fostering connections? I just feel like we can't pick which is the most important. There's so many things, but those two are key. I'm sorry, Derek, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to add that Katie mentioned, showing your coworkers grace, and Erin mentioned doing things to self-regulate and make sure that you're creating that self-care space for yourself. And I was thinking about the fact that I've been removed from working directly with students for a while. I've been in management or administration for a while. And so I've been working more with staff than with kids for several years now. And both of those play into remembering that when we're all, now that all of us have attended the conference, we're all trauma-informed professionals now, and I think we think about kids and we understand that when kids are stressed or overwhelmed or facing that toxic stress or that adversity, that they may behave in ways that we would rather they did not. And we see it through that lens, and we have that understanding. We have to remember that about adults also. And remember that right now, a lot of us are experiencing heightened levels of stress in our personal and professional lives. When we return to, let's say if you're an educator returning to school, you may not know for sure what the schedule's going to look like yet. You may be teaching virtually and in person or blended, or maybe we start in person and we go over, and all of that uncertainty creates anxiety for people. And so just like kids, adults, when they're facing that heightened level of stress, anxiety, the toxic stress, right, of facing that in your professional life, or maybe you have individuals who are sick in your family, or likely some of us have lost loved ones due to this pandemic. When you've got that going on in your life, you may also behave in ways that we just wish you wouldn't as coworkers, right? And so back to that piece about showing each other grace is understanding that we need each other. We need each other's support, and we need each other's understanding that we're not going to be at our best every single day. And so that's where I wanted to go with that, I guess.
Well, and I think to make sure that we're giving everyone that we work with permission to show some of their vulnerability too, is what we're saying, is it's okay, we're all in this, we're all feeling a bit uncertain. We're not really sure how we're going to run the ship depending upon what happens. And it's okay to be vulnerable and let your students know that you're trying to figure this out as you go. And when you tell your colleagues and your students and parents that, I think they're going to feel much more normal and much less alone in how they're feeling as well.
Yeah,
Does anyone have anything else to add?
That's so important to keep in mind, Shay. I can't, vulnerability, I always like to remind myself and others that that's our deepest space of connection. So if I'm willing to say, gosh, I'm really scared right now, and I actually just don't know what's going to happen, everyone else in the room that feels the same way is like, oh, okay, I'm connected, right? So it's a powerful space. So thank you for bringing up vulnerability.
Yeah, and I think that administrators and teachers right now are feeling like maybe they shouldn't be vulnerable. They should be in control, and they should have all the answers, and they should really be modeling this, stoic approach. And I think it's the opposite. I think that it's absolutely okay to just say, gosh, we don't have the answers right now either. We're doing all that we can to communicate them when we get them. But until then, we're in this place of uncertainty, and it feels really, it's hard. It's a hard place to be. We have another good question from both Lori and Jill. Asked the same question. With limited resources, so time and money, what resources would be great to consider purchasing to get started? This sounds like a Kathy question.
Yes, I have been plugging all of our resources because there's this really brilliant woman, Dr. Soma, who writes a lot of them. That is, and Erin Reed. So yeah, I when I read that question, my mind immediately went to your 1 minute resources. Especially working in a school system, those 1 minute resources literally take 1 minute. And I love that they're parceled out by age. You can grab an activity around worry or anger. And so you're dealing with the trauma theme to help heal some of that potential trauma or toxic stress in our kiddos. And then you're also building resilience in them by doing those activities with them. So that would be my number one pick. And I absolutely love, I say this all the time, the 10 Steps book that Dr. Soma just referred to, that her and Derek Allen author. It is so practical. There's so many tools in there that you can use as an educator in your classroom and in your school system. And so those would be my top two favorites. And then coming in third, but not by much, it's a close race, is the Healing the Experience of Trauma program and the Path to Resilience journals for our kiddos. It's just awesome how, and we talk about that, guys, in healing trauma and restoring resilience in schools and structured sensory interventions too. Classroom teachers can take these practical activities and use them in their classroom. And it could be something like, my favorite one is building a bridge. That's about generosity and how we can help people. It can be something so practical and simple, but that is a tool that we use to build resilience and heal trauma. So those are my top three favorites. It's hard to list them though.
I always like to refer to that one and tell science teachers that they can build in some physics and some measuring, and math teachers can use that activity and sort of fit it into a curriculum as well, different standards. I would say too, the Mind Body Skills for Emotional Regulation is a great resource. That's a great resource just for all of your kids and for you as well. So if there's anything that you could implement and do the activities along with your children or students in your classroom, that's really helpful in taking care of yourself at the same time that you're teaching kids about emotional awareness and regulation.
Yeah,
so I know that
to you guys. I love that.
We all have a lot to say.
So the next one, Shay, was, I'm a school principal. I really want to help my educators with unknowns in the upcoming year, but I don't know what is happening. How can I best support them? We kind of talked
I think we kind of answered that one though.
Yeah, we answered that one.
Allison's question.
The next one was the social and emotional. How can we help administrators know that social and emotional? So when will we know when it's time?
Ben usually tells us in the chat. I think I was live today and fixing my hair and I didn't know I was live.
Yes, that's a true statement.
What's different about
Like, are we
that than
live?
every other Zoom meeting you're ever on?
I hate staring at myself. I hate it.
I had to type in the chat box, Kathy, go.
Well, the reason I wasn't watching the new feed because I was trying to keep the questions at the top, and so I wasn't seeing the new ones come in. Oh, virtual realities. We could answer this one. What's the first step in working with Starr to become trauma informed? A lot of people are asking that today, Shay.
Okay.
Call
That's a good
Kathy.
question you put. Call Greg Strand. Flood Greg's inbox.
I love that.
Erin, you should know Kathy put your email address in one of the chat boxes in one of these sessions.
Somebody
Oh,
asked
really?
for it. They say, can I have Erin Reed's email?
That's fine. I like people.
And I was like, what would Erin do? She'd give it to him.
She would.
Don't worry, guys. I'm making our
And Matt
post
said-
about our panel.
Oh, good.
Perfect.
Who took this
Derek,
picture of
why don't
me
you
like this,
welcome
Derek?
everyone back?
All the photo credits go to me.
Will you
I
let
figured
us
it was
know
you.
when you're taking our picture?
Are we
We're
We're
live.
back on.
We're live again.
We're live again, so we have to stop our blooper reel, guys.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
Okay, we're back. So where were we? Which question did we leave off on, Kathy?
We were going to address how we could help our administrators in school district understand the importance of social and emotional wellness. Am I frozen?
Okay. No, you're real. I mean, I can see you.
I think we're good. Erin, you want to take this
So the
one?
question
Or
exactly was,
Katie?
how can I
Yeah,
help leaders
sure.
in my school district understand the social and emotional wellness is the foundation for learning to occur? I feel like Erin
Well, I
should
think-
answer that one.
Yeah, I can start. So I think one of the most helpful strategies in helping and getting administrators and leadership to understand the importance of social emotional wellness is explaining the science to them. Just really explaining what happens to our kids' brains when they're stressed and they have no coping skills to be able to reintegrate their brain. And now, you've got the student stress level rising and the educator stress level rising because we can't access the part of their brain that we actually need to access. So I think science has been helpful, especially for certain personalities, really gravitate toward that. And then maybe for some of my maybe more resistant adults that I've worked with, I try to give adult examples have been really important. How do you feel when, you haven't had enough to eat and, there's all kinds of chaos going on in your home and you're late to school and you just get, sent to, the detention hall and nobody ever asks you how you feel or no one's ever teaching you ways to cope with those kinds of stresses or even making those stresses real. And so any kind of adult example that I can give around the social emotional well-being seems to have impact. I'm encouraged though, because more and more it does seem that administrators are aware of this importance. At this point, it's a federal mandate, so there is some, awareness of the deep importance of social emotional well-being for young people. So those are my two strategies that I've had some luck with.
Not that any of us have met administrators who need to know what's in it for them, but if you know or are working with an administrator who maybe isn't going to respond to the science or respond to the examples that Erin's talking about, if you go from the approach of meeting social emotional learning needs in the classroom helps teachers to manage their classroom and helps minimize out of class behaviors and disruptions, then that would mean to said administrator who needs to know what's in it for them that maybe less students will be leaving your classroom and other classrooms and headed down to the office or to the dean of students or to the behavior interventionist. And I don't know a single administrator who doesn't want to hear that. And so if you need to kind of plug that also, social emotional learning, and I, by the way, am a former educator myself, social emotional learning has a direct impact on your ability to manage behaviors in your classroom. And keep students in class and engaged. And so if you go about it that way, that's kind of a side door entrance to helping an administrator tie in to that work. And then I've seen in schools where, you know, a certain group of teachers will just say, well, we're going to do it in our classrooms, you know, if they've got the culture in that building where they're given that leeway to be able to do it. And then they're able to just prove to the administrator, hey, look at what's happening in my classroom or in these 4 or 5 classrooms where we are implementing this. Look at the difference in classroom management and in behavioral outbursts. And then once you've got enough time, academic gains as well. And so sometimes you have to prove it too, if you have the ability to do that.
And then other teachers and the administrators are saying, oh my gosh, what are you doing in your classroom? It's amazing.
That's right.
One of the things we talked about, guys, on our blooper reel is a question that came in around what is the first step in working with Starr to become a trauma-informed school or agency? So wow. I would answer as the Director of Professional Training and Coaching that we would love to hear from you. And that info, you guys are like, yeah, of course, Kathy asked that question, right? That info at starr.org is a great resource to start with. Let us know how we can help you, and they will get you to the right person. And maybe help ask some questions that can help get you started. And like I had mentioned in my last presentation, for schools, a lot of schools ask, well, where do I start? What do I do next? And so we had some brilliant minds at Starr Commonwealth working on what we call our starter kit to a resilient school starter kit. And it's just some base entry level things for your school that you can get started, where you're going to have 5 certified trauma practitioners and education certifications. And you're going to have 10 virtual coaching sessions with one of our awesome resilience coaches that have had a lot of experience in schools around Michigan. And we love the coaching aspect of that, guys, because what we see is we have these awesome trainings that are just so great, and people leave all motivated and gung-ho to go back and change what's happening in their schools, whether the trainings are virtual or in person. But sometimes we know, on Sunday night, I'm going to have a really good plan to eat well all week. But, Tuesday morning, there may be some struggles with that. So it's the same kind of thing when you're working in a classroom, right? You have the best intentions to use what you learned in training, but then some of the old habits come back, or those stressors are there and we forget what we learned, or we're not sure the best way to implement it. So these coaching sessions are just critical about helping you bridge that gap between training and implementation. And that is led by our senior resilience coach who's on this call right now, Katie Carpenter, and Erin does a lot of great work in schools too, which of course is all led by the content from Dr. Soma and Derek Allen. And so we're really excited about these resilient school starter kits. So contact us at info@starr.org and we can get you started. You guys have anything you want to add to that, Katie or Erin, working in schools?
No, I think that sounds great. I think people are pretty well aware of the Trauma-Informed Resilient Schools course that's free right now. And then certainly the 10 Steps book, those would be 2 good entries into creating a trauma-informed resilient school before engaging in the starter kit. Okay, we've got a couple other questions. So one looks like more of a clinical question. So it's good that we've got some clinicians in here. I know we have a lot of educators. Angela asked, what would you say to families who are afraid to return to therapy in person? I would say that is absolutely okay. Sorry, I'm just answering this right off the bat. I would say that is absolutely okay. What we have found with therapy since the beginning of the pandemic is that families transition very, very well to telehealth. Telehealth can mean a couple of different things. It can mean that you just maintain contact via phone, where you're checking in on a weekly or twice a month basis. It could mean that you are engaging in Zoom calls with the camera on or with the camera off. So I would let families know that there are lots and lots of different options for therapeutic consistency over this time. If they are feeling uncomfortable returning to therapy in person, they should just definitely let their clinician know that, their therapist know that. I believe that many, many therapists are engaging in telehealth services right now and will continue to do so for quite some time. I think it's worth noting too that a lot of kids, especially adolescents, love virtual therapy where there's some sort of distance between them and their therapist. They love to be able to have the option to turn their cameras off or on, or just to make a phone call. It definitely reduces that barrier related to access to services. So I think it's definitely a silver lining in all of this is that we have found that virtual therapy has been very, very beneficial for not just our clinicians, but for our families as well. So I would just say, to be completely honest about that, you can do really, really good stuff via distance. Any other input related to that question? Okay. So the next question is there anything I can give to parents so that we can be good partners? I know I can help students at school, but what can parents be doing at home?
I think one of the things that you can give to parents is as much support as you possibly can. I think that when we have young people living in toxic stress environments, sometimes we lose sight of the fact that we have parents living in toxic stress environments. So resources or interventions that you use with kids in terms of some social emotional learning, even coming at things from a strength-based approach, you can use with parents. And going into those situations, we talked at the beginning about giving grace to our coworkers. We need to give some grace to our parents too, and understand that when we're working with them, if we really want them to be good partners, then we have to treat them like good partners right from the beginning. Treat them as though they're doing the best that they can with what they have, and then figuring out what are some things that we can provide them to enhance their ability to be better parents for these young people.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We have some resources that are great for parents. We have a little booklet that's just called What Parents Need to Know, and it really helps parents understand what trauma and stress is and how it impacts kids. It helps them to understand different symptoms and reactions, what to say, what not to say, when to worry, when to not worry. And then in the COVID-19 toolkit that I just created, there are some handouts for parents, frequently asked questions and things that they can do. Some of our tools and resources, while they haven't been created specifically for parents, are helpful as well. Even the mind-body skills and the 1-minute interventions are things that parents could use with their children. You could definitely send those home or refer to those. I know that Erin has created some mindfulness videos too for parents. So I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about those.
Yeah, so right when we were all given a stay-at-home order, we got together with our coaching team and we made short videos for secondary and elementary kids that could be sent to families and shared with families. And so it's a virtual mindfulness package. It's 6 weeks of lessons. like I said, one for elementary students and one for secondary students, but also with a parent communication letter. So when the educator is sharing those videos, they can have a letter that's already written that they can share with the parents to help explain what the practice is, how it works, how it can be supportive, encouraging them to practice with their students. So that was an offering that we came up with right away, making videos on our phones just to try to stay connected and offer some of those regulatory practices that we know double as self-care for our kids and for parents. I mean, I think my favorite thing is when I used to go to the grocery store more and seeing students that we worked with and their parents, and the parents coming up and saying, I was upset the other day and my third grader came up and helped me breathe through it because she'd learned how to do it at school. So, I mean, it's a family coping skill, and that was the goal of the virtual mindfulness 6-week program, to be able to give it to teachers, empower teachers to have lessons, but also then have a connection to home. My hope is that in all of this, we're going to get really creative with how we connect with families and how we resource families, because if we're going to be doing virtual school's in home now. And so parents no longer can say, I just send them to school and education happens, and teachers can't, be so disconnected. We have to connect more than we ever have in more creative ways. So I think, that's where my head is at as a mom. How can I connect with my local school district? So, is the side of the coin where you have families that are in toxic stress and trauma and are responding to it by shutting down and disappearing from you. But you're also going to have those hyperactive parents who are going to be all up in your space wanting to be looped in. So if we can resource them as much as possible and put that energy into work, into working together, I think that would be really the silver lining of this.
I love that.
And I really love Colleen and Erica, our creators of Skill of the Week, talking about their parent. Oh, go ahead, Shay. No, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to bring that up. Take it away.
I just really enjoyed Colleen. I'm going to pronounce her name wrong. Jermaine and Erica Gervelding are some educators out in New York State. I may have screwed up their last name, so please forgive me, ladies. They are amazing. One is a school social worker, one is a school psychologist, and they've created a courageous classroom skill of the week that has a wonderful editable parent component that when you're teaching these skills in the classroom, then you can send home for the skill to be taught at home also. And they had a presentation that they did on this conference, which hopefully by now you've heard that the videos are going to be able to be replayed. So if you haven't watched that, I would go back and watch that and look into that program, because I've looked at it and studied it as a Starr employee, of course, but their presentation just really brought it to life for me. It was really great. So I would encourage you guys to watch that.
Yeah, I think anything that we're learning as professionals, as practitioners, are things that we can also teach to parents and teach and educate parents about. Feel free to take what you've learned and to put it in words that you think that a parent might be able to understand. Okay, so we've got a couple more questions here. I am a school social worker, but there are students that need more than I can provide. How can I refer students to Starr Behavioral Health? They can absolutely be referred to Starr Behavioral Health. Derek, what do you think the best route would be?
Yeah, well, I saw the question and pulled up the information here. The email address is SBH for Starr Behavioral Health at Starr, STARR.org. If you go to our website, there's phone numbers also. There's a Meet the Clinicians page, and that's at the Starr.org webpage. But if you email SBH@Starr.org, that will get you to our Starr Behavioral Health team, and then they would go through the process of screening whether or not they can provide services for you, but getting you an intake if they can. So absolutely want to help if we can.
Yeah, and right now we're offering all telehealth services, which are going really well. Next question is, educators are so stressed about what to expect this upcoming school year. We are worried about behavioral outbursts, right? How can we help ourselves while supporting our students? It's all just so much to manage.
I can start us off on this one since I've been so blessed to spend some time digging into self-care and educators. So, I mean, I think the question from our administrator that kicked us off around what to do is really important, and how we're nurturing community care as well. How it will be really easy to isolate in this time. It will be really easy to try to shut your door and muddle through. If you're noticing that urge, I think digging back into where you can connect with your community. Who do you have trusting relationships with within your classroom, within your school, within, you know, your community, to be able to really be in that vulnerable space to talk about what you're worried about. I think, you know, when we do a lot of future thinking, it does create a lot of anxiety. So imagining all of the possible behavioral outbursts, all of the possible conflicts we can get into over the new rules about mask wearing and social distancing. I think when you're looking at what you're going to do to support yourself, whatever practice it is whatever it takes to bring you into the present moment. It doesn't have to look like mindfulness or anything else, but whatever it is that keeps you centered and present, and noticing, okay, wow, that's a lot of future thinking, right? That's a lot, and that can bring about a lot of anxiety. So wherever that shows up in your life, to bring you present and keep you grounded, doubling down on that, making sure that you're committing to do it at least once a day, so that pathway inside of your mind and body is built so automatically that when that little cherub takes his mask off and runs across the room and flips to death, you're so strongly centered that that won't impact you as much. So double down on whatever your present moment awareness practices are, would be my strongest advice.
That's great advice, Erin. I think we have to know that behavior and dysregulation is going to be something that we can expect with kids coming in. And that's not to say that every child is going to have behavioral outbursts and dysregulation, but the percentage might be a little bit higher. This is all the more reason to prioritize social and emotional wellness and prioritize that. Just establishing relationships with your kids. So those first few weeks, they need to be relationship building. I hesitate to say, but it's like the academics will have to wait. We cannot prioritize academics in those first few weeks of school, or else we're going to just have a lot of classrooms that are not managed well. So focusing on the connections, even if you've got the academics and the curriculum lurking on your shoulder, just know that you're building a strong foundation to last you throughout that school year.
I think.
Any other thoughts?
I just want to say, know that you can do hard things. I've seen so many amazing educators across the country, working in difficult circumstances or feeling stressed and overburdened. And absolutely everything Erin said and Shay said is very applicable. But man, I know educators can do hard things, and I have faith that we're going to be able to rally together and do what's best for our kiddos, for sure.
I was going to add
that's a good reminder.
There's a piece to this about the expectations that we set for ourselves, and whether I know it sounds easier than it is, but if you can release yourself from the expectation that your classroom or your building has to be perfectly managed and the kids have to behave a certain way at all times, or else that's reflecting on you, or you're going to, whatever that is, that pressure we put on ourselves, and instead remember, number one, that while, yes, we're educators and we want to create those academic success stories, we're also in the behavior game. You all know that. That's why you're choosing to attend a conference like this. Behavior is a major piece of what your job is. It's one of the foundational pieces. And maybe we didn't think it was supposed to be an educator's job years ago, but it is now. And so if you're driving to work and you know that there's going to be behavior problems, then you're actually going to be in a better place to be able to address those behavior problems than if you're driving to work expecting that everything has to go perfectly and then the behavior problems disrupt what your plan was. Everybody on this, on the panel has heard me talk about the firefighter who gets mad when somebody's house catches on fire and they have to go put it out. That's their job. Their job is to put out the fire. Well, our job is to help kids find success and see their greatness. And for many of our kids, that's going to involve figuring out what it is that's going on with them, whatever that unmet need or misdirected energy, thinking back to the circle of courage, what's going on in their life that we need to help them solve. And we need to come alongside them and help teach them how to learn and develop coping strategies that work for them. That is part of our job. And if we understand that, and if we embrace that, I think that it helps when you have the chaotic day where there's kids who are acting out and disrupting, because that's what your job is. Back to the firefighter putting out the fire. And like I said, I know it's easier to say that than to do it, but it can be done.
Oh my gosh, Derek, you got me all fired up. I have to add something. So there's this idea that like you're there to make kids perfect, or you're there to, like have everybody fit into this little square, and that
Right.
You're the superhero, and you're here to save everybody and carry the world on your shoulders. You're not. None of us are. So ditch that mindset right now. What you're there to do is to understand and stay present to the problems and stay present to the behaviors, right? And understand that they can be turned into the most meaningful growth in a human life.
Mm-hmm.
And now we begin, right? And it's like, so I think I myself have gotten caught into some problems when I think, oh, I'm here to like keep these kids like perfect. They're never supposed to act up. They're never supposed to have problems. They're never supposed to color outside the lines. And I'm the savior who's coming to make them do that. As soon as I ditched that mindset and started to understand that in their problems was their most meaningful growth, I was like, it was a different approach and everything shifted. So I think, that's been a really helpful tool for me. And I know I've had discussions with educators who, once they can fling off that cape of superhero-ness and just start to say, of course there's problems, and this is where we grow the most. Now we have a whole different way of approaching it. Instead of like all this constriction and control in our bodies, we're like flow, we're in flow. So, anyway, I digress, but that kind of mindset thinking, I think, has more power than any of us can even ever speak to.
I'm going to respond back to that because you're absolutely right. And so if you as an educator or a clinician, as a professional, if your instinct or your drive is to try to squash the behavior as fast as possible, just get rid of the behavior that you don't want. And typically in schools, what we do is we bribe or punish the behavior away as fast as we can, right? What we've done is we've robbed that student from the experience of learning through that problem and learning how to solve that problem next time themselves. So instead, what we're supposed to do is take the slightly more time-consuming, laborious, maybe messy route of helping them understand why the problem occurred in the first place, right? And what the other options are that they could have used in order to successfully navigate that situation. And we too often, because we want things to be perfect and we want to solve the problem, we then rob the student of the learning opportunity of learning how to solve those problems in the future themselves. So that's an important reminder too.
Spot on. And you'll know you have arrived when you're like, yay, behavior. That's so interesting. Let's get into that.
We have another question. We have a question, both Kim and Rebecca. I was waiting for this question. This is such a good one. How do you feel about masks and mirror neurons? It's tough for teachers not to hug our kiddos upon return as well. So for mirror neurons, I'll start. You guys pick up where I left off or didn't fill in. Remember that mirror neurons pick up all of our central nervous system chemistry or energy. So not just our face. I know that our mouth is big in reading nonverbal body language. But there's something that I remember my mom saying, and she would say things if I was having a really hard time. And once I started to perk up, she would say, the smile has finally reached your eyes, right? So the smile, you can just smile, but does it really reach your eyes? So I think that we have to keep in mind that we may be wearing masks, but there's so much more to mirror neurons and what kids can pick up in terms of our nonverbal body language. So what are your eyes saying, right? What are your shoulders saying? What is your posture saying? What's your tone of voice? Are you bending down to meet them where they are? Are you leaning in? Are you, kind of really showing that interest? And I think while masks are going to definitely be something to get used to, I think that there are a lot of other ways to begin to let kids really know that you're there and you're genuinely interested in trying to connect and learn more about what they're experiencing. I do know that there are some masks. I have a couple of friends who have purchased masks that are clear so that kids can see their faces. I haven't heard the reviews yet. I think the jury is still out on if they fog up and how they can be useful or not useful. But those are an option as well. Anything else?
I think I've seen the face shields that are clear that some schools are talking about, especially in the elementary grade levels, having their teachers utilize those. So,
Shay, I think you make a good point about mirror neurons not just being your face too. I mean, we talk about when we're talking with educators and even, my residential background, like really being mindful of where are your arms. How are your arms crossed when you're talking to a kid? Are they on your hips? What are they doing? And really having that understanding that it's not just your face. It is your whole body communicating with the kids. So yeah, I just thought that was a great point. Because I think we forget that.
I've seen people that, sorry, Kay. I've seen people put pictures of themselves on a button. So if you're meeting people for the first time, like wearing a button that shows your whole face. I've seen photos of that. In the hug comment too, I know when my church opened back up, this is just a silly thing, but I thought it was kind of this would something I would probably need. It says, I'm a hugger or I'm a handshaker. So you could point to what you normally did as a way to show people I really want to hug you, but I can't right now. So I would need that if I was around a lot of people because I might accidentally hug somebody. So that's just another cool one. But I really liked, a lot of people said that they were thinking that would help kids with anxiety. I was reading about in some different forums is a picture of what you look like without a mask. People can kind of get to know you that way.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that. That's a great idea.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah.
Should we move on to our next question?
Yeah, I think you guys nailed that one.
Okay. Okay, so this one is a little bit tricky. I'm not sure that I understand it completely. This question is from Victoria. So Victoria, if I don't hit this where I'm supposed to, feel free to email me and we can have a conversation about this. Victoria is saying, what do you recommend regarding the diffusing process and the feelings check-in? I heard we should debrief the feelings part of this trauma after a couple of weeks of working on how did you experience this and what did you need. but I also heard we should do a feelings check-in. So I think that it would be helpful it'll be more helpful, obviously, to take the full crisis response and diffusing training. But you did hear correctly. So you're hearing that we should debrief the feelings, but the feelings are what have you been experiencing? So it's more identifying what you've been experiencing. So since this happened, I've been really angry. Since this happened, I've been really sad. Since this happened, I'm feeling tightness in my jaw. I've been having a lot of headaches. I've been having a lot of stomach aches. So that's the feelings part and the feelings check-in sort of combined into one. If that doesn't answer your question, certainly feel free to email me. We can set up a call and kind of go through that process, because I know we just did a little bit of an introduction to it in my session earlier today. Let's see. Okay, so Brett is saying, or asking, how do we balance the need to form relationships at the beginning of the school year with the need to establish academic routines so our students can have that security of knowing what to expect each class or each week? So the balance between relationship and academic routine.
Well, I always love to differentiate between a routine and a ritual. And I would be curious, Brett, how it would be possible to turn the academic routines into rituals by adding in fun and play, adding in connection and meaning. How could we do that together, like in the same thing? That would be where I would start exploring if I were you. Yep, I want you to do, this math worksheet, but how could I make it a game where we get to connect and play? We have to be here at this certain time every day, but how could we create meaning around what we do first and connection? Things like that. That's where my brain goes first.
Mm-hmm. I think you hit the nail on the head, Erin, is that they're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Sorry, they're not mutually exclusive. Try to figure out ways to be creative and to incorporate those two things together. I can't really say much more, Erin. As usual, nailed it. So
and I would just like to add, and I think that this is something that's so important to mention, is that sometimes when I say things like, oh, don't worry about academics the first 3 weeks of school, people take that as you don't have any expectations for your kids and you're keeping your expectations low. The expectations need to be very, very high. So academic routine and rigor, I think should still be high, but it has to be done with a lot of support in place and a lot of support that's built on the formation of relationships and connection between students and the educator and other staff members and students and their peers. So I absolutely just want to clarify that we're not saying to throw academics out the window. They just have to be presented in a way that offer a lot of support at the same time.
High expectations, high support.
Yep. Absolutely. Ooh, I have a good question here, you guys. Okay. How can each of you share one of your favorite success stories, either with a child or an educator? That's a good one.
I've got one. I've got 270, but I'll pick one. So I was working with a teacher in a middle school last year who really struggled with finding the positives in her day. And so one of the things that I did as the coach in the building was I made it my job to meet her in her classroom when that last bell rang to help her identify 5 things that went really well that day before she got in her car to go home. So that when she got in her car to go home, those were the things that she thought about, and she didn't dwell on the things that were going wrong. Well, I don't know, January or February. I wasn't in the building that day, but the building that I was working in, there were a lot of issues in the building that day. And this particular teacher was meeting with another staff member in that building, and they were talking about how, oh my gosh, all of this went wrong, and this went wrong, and that went wrong. And then this teacher who I'd been working with said to this other staff member, before we leave, we have to identify 5 things that went wrong, because Katie will be upset with me if I leave thinking all of these negative things. And when she was telling me this story the next day, I was like, I'm so proud of you, because not only did you do what we've been working on for you, but you started passing it on to somebody else. So that's mine.
That's a good one.
That's a good
I
one.
love it.
I'll do a student one. I had a young man who was in a group in our residential treatment program many years ago now. And I was his clinician. And he came to us from a rough story, as virtually every kid who comes to residential treatment does. And he did not react well to being there in the beginning. He was breaking things, breaking windows. I spent several nights in the local emergency room with him after he had done so and messed up his hand. He was refusing to go to school. Once we'd get him to school, he would refuse to leave school. He would refuse to do schoolwork. He would get into fights with other students and lose. He was not following any direction of any kind, was refusing any sort of treatment. And he really was becoming really challenging for me and for my team, and certainly very time consuming. In his mind, nothing that he would ever do would ever turn out successful, because nothing in his mind had ever gone right in his life ever. He'd been through a series of he didn't have a father, and he'd been through a series of mom's boyfriends. None of those situations worked out well. He'd been through eviction with his mother several times and had to move around. He'd never been successful at school. He'd never had friends who really wanted to have healthy relationships with him. He'd been taken advantage of, mistreated in a number of different ways. And so he went into every single day and every situation with the expectation of failure. And so he would just blow it up himself, because why let somebody else blow it up when he knows he can at least take control and destroy the situation himself. And so that's where his head was at. And one day we were walking across campus together, and it had been another very time-consuming day of spending a lot of time with him. And we were walking by our beautiful rec center, and he just out of the blue kind of said, Mr. Allen, I never learned how to swim. And I could have, it would have been very easy for me to have ignored the comment, because I was annoyed with his behavior that day and I was busy with other things. I could have done what, I'm sure I've done before and many adults do, and throw it back at him and say, well, if you would, behave, maybe we could get you swim lessons or something, and kind of throw it back in his face. But for whatever reason that day, the sun was shining down, and the legacy of Floyd Starr was influencing me. And I had an enlightened moment, and I decided to enroll him in swim lessons, even though several others on the team did not think it was a good idea, because they figured he would cause problems during swim lessons. And I kind of thought they were probably right. And so I don't know how much time passed. But eventually I got a call on the radio. I was in the office. He said, Mr. Allen, we really need you to come over to the, do you call them an natatorium, where the pool is at. And I thought, oh crap, what did he do? And so I ran over. It's kind of across the driveway from where the school's at. And I went in there, and this young man was up on the high dive, and he was beaming ear to ear, and he wanted to show me that he was going to jump into the deep end of the pool and swim all the way across and back again. And he did. And then he wanted me to do it again and video it on my cell phone so he could send it to his grandma. And he was so proud to send this to his grandma. This was a pivotal turning point in this young man's treatment, because he had now experienced success in something. Something he did worked out, and he was proud about it. And after that, then he decided to engage in other things. He decided to engage in treatment. He decided to engage in his schoolwork. He ended up winning, I don't know how many accelerated reader awards for the amount of points that he got. He became an avid reader. He did complete his GED, and he did graduate the program successfully. But it wasn't until that moment, and all it took was that one comment that he made in passing. We're walking, and he says, "You know, Mr. Allen, I never learned how to swim." That was what Dr. Brentro talks about, the window words and the opening of doors, right? These kids will say something like that, and it is very important that we take note, because there's a reason it was said. And then if we can utilize that and find those things that kids, it may be outside the box, it may not be academic, it may be something kind of strange, but if we can find things that kids can then experience success, especially those low self-concept kids, it can mean all the world in them turning the corner and starting to engage in a more productive way. So there's my story.
I love it.
You're such a
It's
good
the circle of
storyteller.
courage. It's curiosity. It's everything. Awesome.
I'm having a hard time choosing a story to tell, and especially Derek is such a good, he's so good at telling his story. You just paint a picture. So I mean, I think mine usually, and as I'm thinking of different, and I'm thinking of kids right now, but I'm thinking of how it relates to adults, but it relates to when a kid has a success with emotional regulation. Because sometimes it seems like the work that I'm doing is so simple and redundant. Okay, well, let's check in with your body. Let's do the same regulatory practice. But when you see that this has impacted this kid's ability to have independence in their bodies and to be empowered to choose how they react to things. So I'm thinking of this little first grader who when I worked in schools, was running an intervention with, and he was on the autism spectrum, hyperlexic. He could read anything, but he didn't understand what he was reading. But he really struggled with his emotions. I think probably because he struggled to express himself. He didn't have a lot of words that he had comprehension around. So we just set up a daily check-in where he and I would get together, and I would try to help him express how he felt, because he was coming into class driving his teacher crazy every day, crying, outbursts. All of the behaviors were telling us, I have a need and I can't tell you what it is. I have no words. And so we did a lot of different things. We did body scans. We did different sensory tools to try to help him express how he was feeling. But what really landed for him was one of those glitter jars. So he could shake it up, and he could shake it up to how fast his brain and body was moving that day to show me. And then we would do something, and usually it was just watching and breathing as the glitter settled to get him ready to go into class. So we would do this every day right around the beginning of the day. And then his teacher finally sent me a picture of him about midday. I think it was after recess one day. So we got smart and we thought, well, let's put one of these sensory tools, glitter jars, in his classroom, in his comfort corner, so that he has access to it to connect with it and regulate with it if he needs it. So sure enough, one day after recess, she sends me a picture, and I don't know I don't know how he ended up with 3 glitter jars. I'll still have to find that out. But there's a picture of him with 3 glitter jars watching all of the glitter settle. So now I'm not there to co-regulate with him. He's choosing to do it on his own. So to me, I was like, oh my gosh. So there might have been days where I was like, okay, here we go with the glitter jar again, but that it changed this kiddo's ability to stay in class, not have emotional outbursts, and have a tool that could help him, feel seen and heard and know how to settle himself. Now I think, okay, what kind of adult does he have the chance to be, right? So that's my little story about my little friend.
Mine is not as elegant or as been spoken, but it's short and sweet. And it's actually a little off script, which isn't shocking for me. I went into a school district that wanted to start working with Starr Commonwealth when I first transferred to trauma and resilience work, which I was super excited about. And I remember talking to Derek and Shay and Elizabeth, our CEO, and I said, my son is a 6'3" linebacker, like 230 pounds, and I would not want him walking down the hallways of that school building. Like, it was physically unsafe. I was watching kids literally assault each other in the hallways and adults standing around watching. And I can proudly say, after a couple years of intervention through training and coaching with Starr Commonwealth, you walk in that school building now, and not only is it safe, I mean, it's certainly not perfect, so I don't want to paint that picture, but not only is that school building safe, but you don't see kids running through the hallways. You see kids in class, and like, I think the last time I was in there, I looked around and I was like, is this the same building? And so when adults get involved in trauma-informed and resilience-focused practice, you can really see the environments of kiddos improve. And that's just one example. And Erin worked in that school building. Katie worked in that school building. And some of our coaching staff worked in there and were trained in our concepts. So that's my favorite story as far as recently, anyway. Good job, guys.
Mine's kind of, I know, I love the stories of students, but mine is very similar to Kathy. It's meeting educators who are so like resistant to everything that we have to say, right? They're just like, this means that you have no consequences for kids. You don't have high expectations. Things are just going to be off the charts. This is the craziest idea that I've ever heard of since I started my career. And then to see that shift and that journey that they take, and then they sort of pivot and say things like, oh my gosh, I would never teach any other way than the way I teach now. I like it so much better because now I have this approach. So I would say that's my biggest success story or stories that I've heard. There's been many times that I've been in front of educators that I thought were going to shoot bow and arrows at me as I was trying to lure them into trauma-informed resilience-focused practice. So it looks like we are nearing the end of our Q&A. So if we did not get to your question, I just want to, remind you again that you can reach out to us at any time to ask those questions. Our customer care team does a really good job at fielding those to the appropriate person. We'll get you to whoever we need to get you to. And I just want to wrap up with a little bit of housekeeping just so that you make sure that you can take advantage of everything that the virtual conference has to offer you in the next month. First of all, if you can complete the conference evaluation, that would be so helpful for us. As you know, this is our first ever virtual conference. We are used to, here my dog is coming in again. We are used to holding in-person conferences, and we've gotten very good at in-person conferences. And this is now virtual, and we have over 1,000 participants. So you can imagine that the back end, we call it the war room, has been busy trying to just navigate all of the streaming and everything. So if there's anything that you can suggest, any evaluation responses that you can give us, we would love to hear from you. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, what you liked, what you would change, all of those good things. Just want to remind you again that the content related to the live question and answer sessions we'll take a minute to pull up for you guys to be able to access later. Keep an eye on your email for notification that the live Q&A segments are up and ready for you to view. But all of the content, so every session, all of the live Q&As will be available for you to view for the next 31 days. So make sure that you are accessing anything that you missed or rewatching those sessions that you love and want to take additional notes on. Attendance credit will be given after you watch each of those sessions. You know, there's a code at the start and the end of each of the sessions, so make sure that you use that. There is also a 20% discount reminder. I want to let you guys know. A 20% discount code has been emailed to all of you. If you didn't get it, let us know that too. It can be used for any digital content. So that includes the new COVID response ebook, the new 1-minute interventions, all of our online courses, and there's additional things as well. What else? Let's see. We want you to stay in touch with us, obviously, whether it be through social media or email. We love to hear from you and see how you're using our tools and resources. We have been trying to gather as much information as we can about what more we can do to support you. So if there's things that you would like to see us create or train on, we are always looking for suggestions. We have lots of people that are always eager to dive in and do research and create new training opportunities for professionals and new resources and tools. And then I think just lastly, we really want to thank you for participating. This has been really, really fun for us. It was fun to create. It was fun to film our sessions. It was truly a learning experience, but we had a good time doing it. I don't know if you could tell, but we kind of like each other. We have a pretty good crew here. And we just hope that you find all of this content really valuable. And then I just want to leave you, last one thing is just the Starr theory of change. And we wholeheartedly believe this. So, you know, we've been doing this work since 1913. And we really feel that because we've learned so much from the students, the families, the children, the schools, the educators, the professionals that we work with, that we have to continue to share this. So our theory of change is that if trauma-informed, resilience-focused adults work within trauma-informed, resilience-focused systems, whatever those may be, they can be behavioral health centers, they can be schools, it can be primary care clinics, then the well-being and success of all children will improve. So you definitely responded to my initial call to action on the morning of the first day of this conference, where we're really saying that we need as many people as possible who work with children to be trauma-informed and resilience-focused. So again, thank you on behalf of all of us at Starr Commonwealth. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, everybody.